Let's go. Hello, my name's Derek Arden and welcome to Monday Night Live. Today I've got David Skinner on. David's a friend of mine. We worked together in Barclays for over 4 years, and we both left Barclays with a big grin on our faces. And as we were studying negotiation, if we couldn't leave Barclays with a grin on our face, there would be no hope for anybody in this subject. David, like me, is a lifelong learner, like a lot of you that are on here today, a leadership trust leader, mentor and coach, and goes through things quietly, writing 14 pages on books like Don't Split the Difference or Never Split the Difference. We have a common like for beer, and when David told me in the Horse and Groom in Guildford that he'd written a 14-pager on Don't Split the Difference after I gave it to him as a book to read, I thought we better get David on here. Chris Voss, who we're going to talk about, is a New York City hostage negotiator, a man who never takes prisoners too well, but his view is a win-win. David, tell me about what you took away from Never Split the Difference.
Right, thanks very much, Derek. As a little bit of context, I have to admit to a debt I owe Derek, because many years ago, I won't say when, but it was last century, Derek introduced me to the Harvard negotiating, getting to yes structure, with walkaway positions, zones of potential agreement, etc., which was fantastic. I mean, it really gave me a framework to think about negotiations and plan them in advance and to execute them, and it worked pretty well. And I've always been grateful to him for that, because you go through life and see that most of the people you deal with don't think in that way, and it gives you an advantage to start with. But I've always been a little bit worried about it because it's felt a bit too clean and mechanistic. And the question I've always asked myself is, well, what happens when you're negotiating with somebody who has absolutely no interest in win-win? The whole point of it is undermined straight away. And all they want to do is just make you do what they want. And that seemed to me a lot more like hostage negotiation. And Chris Voss, I think he was the lead negotiator for the CIA. His book really gave me a few other thoughts and learning points. I'll also refer to another book by a guy called Richard Mullender, who was Chris Voss's equivalent in Scotland Yard. I think it's called 5 Communication Secrets of a Hostage Negotiator. Has some similarities. But the first thing that really drove home is something which we sort of all know, but I hadn't really thought of it in that way, is the impact of emotional thinking versus rational thinking in negotiations. And the Harvard model is very rational. I mean, it assumes that you've got 2 rational, selfish decision makers who are both trying to work out the best agreement that meets the core needs of both. And it assumes they've got a common rational view of what's fair and what isn't fair, a common rational view of what things are worth. But I think we all know people aren't necessarily always that rational, and actually emotional thinking tends to drive the rational thinking and underpin it. So we would typically think it's more valuable to move in a negotiation position from 90 to 100% than 45 to 55%, but the value's actually the same. Daniel Kahneman talks a lot about it in Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, about how losses loom larger than gains. So you can influence somebody more by making them worry about a loss than making them excited about getting a gain. And so Voss talks quite a lot about that. And his focus is very much around understanding that the emotional view of your counterparty, their values and their beliefs, sets the tone for how their rational thinking operates. So if you want to influence them, particularly if they're stressed and have no interest in you, what you need to do is influence the emotional side of them in order to guide their rational response. And he does this in a number of different ways, but he cites one example that when somebody gives him an unreasonable demand, his response is, how am I supposed to do that? which is appealing to their emotions, that they've just asked something that is unreasonable, and they need to change their views because it's not a rational response particularly. And so his focus is very much on acutely listening to all the clues as to what their values and beliefs are, the things that really matter to them. And he calls it tactical empathy, because when people feel that they're being listened to, they start to clarify their own thoughts, they become less defensive, and they're more open to your points of view. Richard Mullender talks about it in a different format, that acute listening is all about listening and not about not interrupting, that people don't really have conscious control of what they're saying. If you just leave them to talk, they'll tell you a heck of a lot more than they think they are. And they're doing that because you're listening to the cues about their values and beliefs that most of the time you'd otherwise miss. So that's the emotion.
Yeah, I was just going to chip in there. When I'm helping clients, that's my job, just to sit there and listen. And when Dave and I were involved in a negotiation, we decided we were going to let the other side talk themselves out, and they went on for about 25 minutes telling us all sorts of things. And that was a strategy. I don't know if you would call that, he'd call that tactical empathy, but it was tactical empathy totally, to be like them, even though we could have sat across the table and shouted at each other. I was just wondering while you were talking how Putin gets out of this hole he's in at the moment, really, because there's no logical way of getting out of it, is there? But someone's got to let him out emotionally to call the threats off. Yeah, thanks, David. We'll come back to that later if we need to. Now, what about body language? I'm a big fan of reading body language in a negotiation, but he talks, doesn't he? Chris Voss talks about it's overrated.
Yes, well, I don't think he necessarily says it's overrated, but it's the question is it overrated or not? And I think the answer is yes and no. He talks about its importance in terms of understanding those emotions, values, and beliefs, and the cues that you get are often nonverbal. And the argument for body language is that emotions are signaled more clearly through body language than they are through the words. The stat that everybody seems to quote is this guy Mehrabian, who did a study, I think it was in the 80s, and his conclusion was 7% of the meaning comes from words, 38% from tone of voice, 55% from body language. Therefore, body language is the most important. But he himself said that only really applied when you're trying to talk about emotions, emotional communication. So yes, it is important, and there's a very good reason to focus on it. But the argument for it not being important is one that Mullender proposes. He says, well, if you turn the sound down off the television and just look at the pictures, are you going to, how much of the sense of what's being said do you actually pick up? Is it 55%? And I think for me, that answer would be a lot less. I wouldn't really know what's going on if I didn't know the words. And his argument is very much around the fact that you will learn so much if you acutely listen to the words alongside the body language, and that if you had to listen to one or the other, you're going to pick up more out of the words. And for me, I think the focus on body language becomes almost to the exclusion of the words. And if you had to have one or the other, I think I'd choose the words, but it's how you listen to them that makes the difference. And Mullender talks about something he calls conscious excellence. We've probably all heard about the progression in learning from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence. When you've mastered how to learn, you've learned how to drive or whatever it is. Mullender adds on top of that conscious excellence, and he likens it to the fact to being like an advanced driver. And when you're doing your advanced driving, you are laser focused on absolutely everything that's going on in front of you, around you, behind you. You're working out what might be going on, what cues you're getting, what somebody might do. And it's draining. It's absolutely exhausting. And you couldn't drive like that all the time. But when something's really, really important to you, you're driving an ambulance at 100 miles an hour, that's the skills you'll adopt. And listening's the same. So in a hostage negotiation, his view is you need to become consciously excellent at listening. And that's what will pick up the cues that give you the clues as to the values and the beliefs, much better than the body language will. I think both of them would say body language is important and you can pick up a lot from that. But that real focus on conscious excellence for listening, I think, is pretty important.
Can I just stop you there a minute and cover a couple of things you said there? So that model, which some people will know about and some people won't, is that when we don't know what we don't know, that's unconscious incompetence, isn't it? And then we find out that we don't know things, so we become consciously incompetent, and then we move to conscious competence, which you have to go back to once you start teaching these subjects, which is why you learn so much when you teach or run a session for your team, etc. And then you become unconsciously conscious, where you're doing things on rote. And then, you know, I've had to learn to be consciously excellent when I'm listening for someone in a negotiation, because you want to hear the words and the body language. So I think it's very interesting. I think they're all important. I think the words are important. I think the movement's important. The smiles are important. But there's just something else I wanted to mention. He talks about it, mirror neurons. So if you consciously mirror and match the body language of the other person, and maybe you should do this in an internal meeting or something with people listening to this, you can actually anticipate what they're going to say next. Now people say you've actually you know, what is this, some sort of psychic superpower? No, it's not. It's been proven that on MRI scans, when you do this, the MRI scans show a connection, and he talks about that, and it's again something I do, and you get connected with it. And the best example of that is if you go down a pub with a pal of yours and mirroring each other's body language. You'll probably be doing that anyway, but mirror the words as well. Suddenly you'll be thinking on the same wavelength. So yes, thanks for that, David, and sorry to interrupt you. Just to add to that, let's move on. So we're moving on to the F word, are we?
Yeah.
Wonderful F word.
The power of fair. People agree to things, comply with agreements because things are fair rather than because they're rational. So they attribute a lot of value to fairness. And they'll agree to things they otherwise wouldn't just because they're fair, or they'll disagree with things because they think they're unfair. And that's an emotional decision again. We try and retrofit it with a rational argument as to why something's unfair, but fundamentally it's emotional. And Ross talks about an exercise he does on his courses where he pairs everybody off, and he gives one person in each pair £10 and says, you've got to split that with the other person. And if you agree on the split, you can keep the money. If you don't agree, give it back to me. And they all have their negotiation as to what's a fair outcome. And then when he's debriefing it, everybody has a different fair outcome. It's not necessarily rational. If it was rational, they'd all have the same outcome. And that would probably be something like, I keep £9, I'm giving you £1. You're better off than you otherwise would be, so why wouldn't you agree to that?
Just to check in with what you're saying there. So one person makes the offer to the other person, don't they? The other person can either accept it or not. Is that right? So I could say,
they have to come to an agreement. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to keep £90. I'm going to keep £9, David. You get £1. You're well off because you get £1. So just take it and don't argue.
Yeah. Yeah.
But most people wouldn't think that's fair, even though they're getting £1 they wouldn't have got before. And
they would reject it.
Is that what the statistics say?
Even though that's unreal, not rational, because I could be £1 better off, but I'm not accepting it because I don't think it's fair. Okay, I'd like to check in what everybody thinks here. So let's do it as 80-20. You can keep 20. I'm going to keep 80. Everybody, if I offered that to everybody on the call, would you accept that? Would you accept that 20? Yes or no? Y or no? Y or N in the chat box, please. And should we keep going while people are doing that? Yep. And there are a lot of different types of fairs. I mean, if you're, you could characterize three different types. One's defensive. So the other side might try and use that to destabilize you, make you feel defensive and uncomfortable, and hopefully make a concession. So that's not fair. Oh, well, I want to make it fair. So how do I change to make that happen? And Voss's response, which I think is brilliant, is, I'm sorry, let's go back to where I started treating you unfairly, and then we'll fix it from there. And I can think of so many times I could have used that rather than feeling awkward. So that's his first one. The second one's an accusation. We've given you a fair offer. And the response that he comes out from that is, well, if you think it's fair, then it seems like you're happy to provide to come up with some evidence as to what you think is a fair offer, turning the emotional into the rational. And the last one, which is the constructive, positive one, is an empathetic fair. I want you to feel you've been treated fairly throughout this negotiation. Stop me any time you think you're being treated unfairly, and we'll address it, which takes the toxicity out of it. So do you want to? So have you got your
Well, basically, everyone's saying no. They would give up their £2 or £20. I think I got muddled up with it was 2 or 20. But they give that up and they walk away with nothing, just to stitch you up so you didn't get your 80, which is totally irrational, isn't it? Totally.
It's an emotional response.
And utterly irrational. But
well, you could then not.
Didn't I read that some people would take 40 statistically, but when you got to 70 or 30, people started getting, wound up. You're ripping me off, David Skinner.
Yes. Well, I mean, everybody's got a different value they attribute to this thing called fairness, and it's just emotional.
Yeah.
Why is it worth giving up £4 because it's unfair, but not £5?
Absolutely. I've been in negotiations where people have said to me, and I think that's fair, and I've gone through my mind thinking how I'm going to handle that. Well, you might think it's fair, pal, but I don't. So we're going to have to sort this out. So I've really discouraged people from using the word fair when I'm coaching them on negotiations.
Yeah.
But yeah, the famous F word, he uses it, doesn't he? Yeah. And then we move on to 3 kinds of yes, don't we?
Yes. He talks about 3 kinds of yes, which again is something that I've understood, but I've never really thought about it that clearly. You get a counterfeit yes, where actually they really mean no, but it's much easier to say yes to get out of an awkward discussion. And we've all seen times where you can almost see the wheels going round in their head saying no, but the sound that comes out of their mouth is yes. There's a confirmatory yes, which is really just a reflexive acknowledgement of what you said, not much more than that. There's no promise of action, nothing that follows after it. And then there's a commitment yes, which actually, I'm committed to what I'm saying yes to, and we're going to do something about it. So that would lead to action. And his point is that an early yes is almost always counterfeit. If you're going to get to a commitment to action, a commitment yes, you really need to start by getting them to say no. Not just think no, but actually say it. And that the process of moving from no to yes gets commitment. So you need to rethink, when you hear no, you need to rethink what it actually means. Does it mean I'm not ready to agree yet? You're making me feel uncomfortable. I don't understand. I don't think I can afford that. I actually want something else. I need more information, or I've got to talk to somebody else about this. Could mean all sorts of different things. But if you can dig in as to what their no is and get them to move away from that no, you're getting to a position where you might get some commitment. And he says sometimes he opens it up really bluntly and just starts off by saying, well, let's talk about what you say no to. And uses that as a framework from where he starts to move to a yes. I think that's really quite powerful. You can think of a number of times where actually, if you ask somebody what you want them to say yes to, once they've said no, you're in trouble. But if you get them to say no to something else and then move them along to where you want them to be, you're much more likely to get there.
That sounds an interesting psychological move, isn't it? One of the things where I use body language is teaching people to make a statement followed by a yes tag question or a no tag question. So just to give you an example, let me give you an example. So are you, so we agree you're going to buy that car, aren't you? And then you ask the yes tag question at the end, aren't you? And you watch their body language. And if their body language is quiet, like you're saying, there may be a chance you're not going to close the sale. So you need to close it there and then on an emotional yes, rather than no. So, okay, and that's another way when you ask a question like that, you can watch the body language, and the body language will tell you what they're going to do. So it's fairly simple.
Yeah.
Yep. Back to you.
Yeah, I mean, he talked on the theme of 3 different types. He also talked about 3 different types of silence. And silence from the counterparty is very much dependent on the character of that counterparty. And the more you get a sense of what that counterparty is like, the more you're going to be able to respond intelligently to that silence. So you might find that there's somebody who really values relationships and wants to get on with you and be on great terms. And if they're quiet, he suggests that might mean that they are angry about something. They're not happy. So otherwise, they'd be chatty and positive. You might have somebody who's really just focused on the outcomes, focused on the goals, not so interested in getting on with the people. And if they're silent, it probably means they haven't got anything to say. Or you might have somebody who is absolutely obsessed by the detail and wants to understand everything. And if they're silent, it probably means they want some time to think. So if you're a goals person, you're likely to fill silence by talking. If your other side, if your counterpart is a details person, they're simply going to get annoyed because what they really want is time to think. So that sense of understanding the way the other person thinks and responding to it is all part of that empathy that we talked about up at the start.
Absolutely. And we're talking about the power of 3 again, aren't we? We're always talking about the power of 3. And then I'm amazed how many people don't put the power of 3 into practice. They have to go and put 7 points to try and persuade someone. Yet all the psychological techniques say, 3, and put the one you want bang in the middle, because people buy the one that's in the middle anyway. We've talked about that so many times, but never forget the power of 3. There's 3 in the Bible. There's 3 in everything. Moving on, I like what he talked about, an accusation audit, doing an accusation audit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, that really struck me because I realized I did that when I was working in banking. And he gives the example where he was actually consulting with a business, and they had there was a subcontractor. I don't remember the exact details, but there was a subcontractor, and various circumstances had meant the subcontractor had been unable to deliver what the client wanted, and the client was enormously unhappy about it, didn't want to pay the fees, and just wanted to get rid of them. And he got them to start with an accusation audit. So the subcontractor, who was on the back foot, came there and had thought through every bad thing that client could put towards them, all the bad things they might think about them, and he listed them to them. You might think this. You probably think that we've overcharged you and we haven't been listening to you, etc., etc. And by doing that, he took the sting out of them, and they actually started going, yeah, you're right about that. And they're able to talk about the issues, having taken the emotion out of it. And it did strike me that that's precisely what I did in some of my weaker business cases when I was in front of credit and capital committees at Barclays. So Tony probably recognizes that strategy very well, having been in credit within Barclays. So the receiver of an accusation audit. But there have been times where I've had to go in with a case and I've thought, we had a business case last year and we haven't delivered any of that. There's a reason for it, but the client has actually not behaved particularly well. We haven't made the revenue that justifies the commitment of capital. There's no promises, and they favored other competitors. So why on earth would this committee of psychopaths who basically want to rip my head off want to agree to this thing yet again, when I've just let them down on every case, every argument I had last time? So I ended up going through all the things that we said last time that haven't happened and what they might think about the client, and therefore what the discussion was about what we do about it, and why I think the best answer is to continue to commit the capital. And it worked, because I could see they were all ready to jump down my throat. So the power of an accusation audit, we often do it behind closed doors when we're planning a pitch, but actually to do it in front of a client, I suspect you have to think quite carefully about it. But I thought that was a really interesting trick.
The typical one I was thinking about is when the client holds something up their sleeve when you want to put the pricing up, and they then accuse you of screwing something up 3 months ago or 4 months ago and pull that in. I mean, I think the whole thing about an accusation audit is to get all the information, isn't it? Get all the information about that client. If it's an important client under the 80-20 rule, then clearly you need all the information that's available, and information's power. But the use of information, like you did there, is really where the power is.
I think it's taking the initiative on the awkward topics rather than leaving the initiative with the other party. I
would say most people go into a negotiation without any of that at their fingertips, and whether that's a negotiation for a sale of a business, for buying a business, or whatever. My evidence is people just wing it, hope for the best. And I think the negotiation's the haggle, and it's that preparation, which is actually, I've never heard a credit committee called a committee of psychopaths. So I don't know whether you want me to delete that from the recording, but I'm not going to, because I think you're probably right.
I'm sure Tony would realise he wasn't in that category.
I was just going to say, thank you for the vote of confidence.
Sorry to the others that I've got 3 or 4 people from Barclays on here, pals of mine.
Apologies to any psychopaths as well.
Yeah. David, moving on, listening comes up in the book all the time. It comes up in my book. It's just so important. Active, disciplined listening, whatever. What's your take on what Voss says about listening?
Well, I think it's very much is around focusing on the cues that tell you about the values and beliefs. He's continually coming up with that, as does Mullender in his own way. I mean, the black swan thing, which you mentioned earlier, is a good example of that. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, he talks about black swans, and in fact, his business is called Black Swans, as we know. It was the Dutch explorer, wasn't it, in Australia, that saw black swans. No one believed black swans existed, but we don't want any Googlies in a negotiation. Yeah, tell us what he says.
Yeah, his view is that in every negotiation, each party has 2 or 3 key points that are completely invisible, that if they became visible would totally change the dynamic of the negotiation. And we've all been there, knowing what our Achilles heel is. And we might not even realize it's an Achilles heel. But so, for example, you're going into negotiation and you know your legal advice is you haven't got a leg to stand on. If the other party found that out, the dynamic of that negotiation would be transformed. And his view is that they're always there, and the holy grail is to listen so hard that you pick up the things that don't just quite add up. There's something that doesn't quite make sense, and that might be body language doesn't match words, or a little hesitation, or a change of tone in voice, or a funny word, or something contradicts something else that isn't just quite consistent. And picking up those super subtle cues where somebody just isn't, it's not quite right, is the way into picking up those black swans and giving you the opportunity to transform things your way.
Well, of course, it's listening to what's said, what's not said, as Nancy's just put in the chat box, how it's said, the way it's said, the body language accompanying the way it's said, because people will tell you people rubbing their noses is not lying. But I tell you, when people rub their noses, you want to pick that up because they're not comfortable with what they're saying, because they get that little itch all round their nose, just like Pinocchio. So it's just picking up those signals, really, really listening. And as we know, the word listen is an anagram of silent. So it has the same letters. So you've got to stay silent in your mind, silent with your mouth when you're really, really listening. Yeah.
That's another good point, Derek, that Molinder comes up with. One of his core things for excellent listening is what he calls minimal encouragers. So saying the least you possibly can to get the people on the other side to keep talking.
Yeah.
And so he gives the example of somebody says, "Oh, I'm going on holiday next week," and your minimal encourager wouldn't be, "Oh, where are you going?" Because what he might be wanting to talk about is how he's under stress at work, or whatever else it is. But that might divert him. He's diverting him onto your world away from his world. So the least you can say, which might just be a nod or a really, and just keep quiet. This is a silent point. So use of minimal encouragers is a big deal. We all open our mouths too much.
Yeah. I worked in Abu Dhabi with a guy who was a really good salesperson, and he used to say all the time, "Anything else?" That's all he'd say. So he'd ask an open question: "Anything else? Anything else?" Yeah. And when we used to go sometimes to credit, and the police use this, is there anything else I need to know before we make a decision? So just in case they were holding things back. And that's another good one, isn't it? If you were selling a business or helping people sell a business, like I'm sure Alex does and a few other people around here, you really want to know. You want to do the due diligence. And of course, they usually put you under pressure or time pressure, so you can't really do the due diligence. So, you know, I'd be tempted to take an indemnity or take some sort of signed piece of information that you've told us everything we need to know to make a rational decision. I'm sure they wouldn't sign that. The lawyers wouldn't let them sign that. But the last point, because we're a little bit short of time, there's a few things in the chat box as well that we need to go to, is this beware of yes and master no. I was really taken by that, and I thought really a lot about it. If you can get the person to disagree, they feel more in control, and then you can slowly wear them down. What's your summary of that?
Well, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that's the point he was trying to make around the using no to get to yes. The early yes is the counterfeit yes, and hearing no as something other than no, and using it to explore how you move them forward and where you take them to. I think he was quite clear about that. What this conversation doesn't do is give the wealth of stories that he puts around them, which illustrate these points much better than just a dry conversation can.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely right. I mean, I got two copies of this book, which is typical of me. You know, I got the one that's all thumbed, and I've got another one to lend out to people. But when I went through it, when we rehearsed it yesterday, in the cafe at Newlands Corner with the sun out, we talked about it, didn't we? And I've been through 4 or 5 pages. There's so much information in there, it's hard to compute it all. But the statement, the no statement, which says, how am I supposed to do that, which is an open question followed by that question mark, and you just shut up. Or he said, in a hostage negotiation, if we do pay you, how do we know you're going to release the hostage?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, it's using higher authority, isn't it? How am I supposed to do that? In other words, I've got to go to the committee, I've got to go to the board, I've got to go to my fellow directors, my fellow trustees. You need to explain to me how I'm going to agree to a ridiculous situation without losing my job or my street credibility. One last tip from the book, David, or are we nearly?
I think we pretty much. I mean, there's a lot of other material there, but I think it would distract. I mean, his point, never split the difference, is exactly the point about having an alternative view to the Harvard one, which does encourage people to split differences to come to a mutual agreement in the middle of their positions. His alternative is very different in terms of coming up with his number and how he moves away from it.
Yeah, it's interesting that never split the difference. When I went on my first negotiation course, having been thrown out of Tesco's, and thought I better do something about this and learn this key subject. We talked about never split the difference, and a client said, let's split the difference. And I said, no, I can't do that, but I could go 70-30. And he said, oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'll do that. And I thought, oh, this works. Wow. Game on. And I know one or two other people have got some questions on that as well. But David, can I thank you for doing the hard work? We've had two classes on this. We've had lots of discussions. We've both learned a lot. And I hope the people watching this have taken some tips away, some hints away, things that they can put into practice themselves. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on the Negotiations podcast, thanks for joining us. And I expect David and I have been doing another session on this important subject shortly. Will you come back and do that after Christmas?
Yeah, very happy to. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask everybody to give David the usual round of thanks in the normal Monday Night Live way? Thanks, David, and catch up with you all later.